Hey guys, Ninja here and welcome to my super in-depth tutorial about motion tracking. This tutorial will be very in-depth, so be sure you have the time for it, but if you don't worry because it's split up into different sections of each different topic and you could skip to whatever section you want to at any time throughout the tutorial. So with that, we're going to cover a lot of different topics, 8 chapters to be specific, which will be recording cinematics, rendering cinematics, tracking in Boujou, laying out in Cinema 4D, designing in Cinema 4D, rendering in Cinema 4D, compositing in After Effects, and rendering in After Effects. So with that, let's get started on to chapter 1, which will be recording cinematics.
We are all stars under the sun. That's who we are, won't ever stop. It's so amazing what we
Recording cinematics is one of the biggest parts of motion tracking because it directly affects the way your end motion track is going to look. So it's important to have a really good cinematic that has smooth movements, and so to do that you want to be sure that you take multiple recordings of the cinematic and keep the best one that you think will be the easiest to motion track and will look the best in your final edit. So with that, let's start with something pretty basic, recording cinematics, being your own actor. This tutorial was made specifically for Black Ops 2 and Modern Warfare 2 as they're the most played games at the moment, but it also works in Modern Warfare 3 because it has a theater mode, but I'm using Black Ops 2 because it has a theater mode as well as a Dolly mode system, which is very useful in the future. And Modern Warfare 2 doesn't have any of that, so I'm going to show you how to do everything without those things. Alright, so I'm in Black Ops 2 right now, and the goal of this is to find a spot for my cinematic for my text, and I just have a pretty basic game mode saved to my hard drive, which is specifically for cinematics, and it's nothing too special. It's just a hardcore free-for-all game mode with unlimited time and score limit, and what this will do is let me have no name tags over people's heads in theater mode, and also you want to make sure you have game recording on so that you could go and actually record your cinematic later in theater mode. So now I'm going to start the game, and the goal of this is to just find a spot for my cinematic, and I'm going to find a spot that is an open area with a lot of space, and that's why I chose Turbine, because there's a lot of room everywhere. There's a couple clearings, and I actually already have in mind a really nice spot for my text, and I'm actually going to show you guys. And Turbine's really nice because it has a lot of room, like I said, and there's also a lot of stuff in it that makes it look good. For example, those windmills in the background, a lot of stuff in the background will look nice whenever you record your cinematic. And there's also a sun right there, which will look nice if we have text in front of it, which will add on to the cinematic. And so you always want to have those factors in mind whenever you're scouting for a spot. And so yeah, that sun is actually going to look really nice now that I think about it. And so what I'm going to do is, since I'm going to have my text in this clearing here, I want to run across to that airplane all the way on the other side, so that I have something going on in my cinematic, so it's not so bland and boring. So I'm just going to run across this entire plane, and what that'll do is it'll just add on to the cinematic, so it makes it look better, and it adds on to it. I don't know, it just makes it look better, and it doesn't really take much, so you always want to make sure you do that. If you want to have something else going on, like for example someone jumping off of something or anything similar to that, you want to make sure you do that because it really doesn't take much more effort, and it really shows that you put in more effort into your cinematic, and it just makes it stand out from the others and makes it look really nice. So I'm in theater mode right now, and I just loaded up the game that we just played on to get the actual actions. And I'm just going to go into theater mode and set up the Dolly camera, which was pretty simple to use once you get the hang of it. It's hard to actually get it just the way you want, but the concept of it is simple, and you can get really creative with it. So right here I'm going to show you a basic rundown of what Dolly mode is and how it works and how you should use it. What it is basically a system that's called a Dolly mode system, and what it does, it has points in any area and the camera follows those points throughout a certain span of time. So let's say, for example, as I'm showing you here, I place a camera right here at the 1 minute mark, and I just insert a camera marker here. So right here you see the camera marker, and I can go forward in time, say maybe 10 seconds, and I go over here to where the broken airplane part is, and I could just put another camera marker here. So you can see when I go back to the 1 minute mark, and you see in the edit camera mode option, you see the first camera marker here, and then the second one all the way over there. And what it does is just it follows that path. You can see the yellow or the orange line that it follows. It follows that path when you're in the dolly camera. The camera follows that path throughout that span of time, throughout those 10 seconds. So with this, you could have multiple markers, and the multiple markers will actually follow the smoothest path that you actually could have. So say I have at the 1 minute and 10 second mark, I have the second marker right there, and let's say at 1:13 I have another marker over here. So it's gonna smooth out that path, as you could see here. If I could get the sun out of the way, you could see the first camera over here at the 1 minute mark. Then it follows that path. It's going to follow that path. There's a camera right there because we're at the 1 minute 3 second mark, and it's going to follow that all the way to the second, and then it's going to see curve downwards smoothly, very smoothly, into the third. And some other options you could have are the speed at which the camera actually moves, at which the dolly mode actually moves. So it would be as if you're like slightly pressing RT or the right trigger to actually have it slow down, as you can do in like theater mode and everything. And you could also speed it up. So to do that, you want to go into the edit camera mode and go into whatever camera, and if you edit the speed of this camera, say you edit the speed of the first camera marker, and then it's going to affect everything that's that's in front of that marker. And say I can move it into linear mode. Manual is just the default that it's going to be. It's just going to be the same speed as whatever you're playing the theater mode in. And linear actually speeds it down into 0.3. And what fix does, well, let me show you what linear does first. Linear, say at this point in time, at the 1 minute mark right here, it's going to start off at 0.3 times speed, and as it goes on, as it goes through this entire path up until the second marker, it's going to speed up until it gets to the speed that this is, which would be 1.0. So as you can see, it slows down here, but as it goes, it's going to keep speeding up slowly and slowly until it reaches the second camera marker. And at the second camera marker, it's going to go back to 1.0 speed, where it's going to be normal, as you can see there. So if you want it to be the same speed all throughout and not change, not gradually increase or decrease depending on if you're speeding it up or slowing it down, you want to change it to fixed. And what that'll do is it keeps it 0.3 speed at 0.3 times speed throughout the whole entire track until the second camera marker. And I can't change it at all. I can't really fast forward this, but it goes 0.3 times speed throughout the whole thing, and it doesn't speed up. But whenever it reaches the second camera marker, it goes back to 1.0 speed. So you can change this to whatever you want. Say you want to speed it up at this point, and you want it to stay sped up throughout that entire path to the third marker. You could do that, and so it would just look like that, just sped up, fixed, and the results are pretty noticeable. And the same thing goes if you want to change that to linear. It starts sped up from here, but then it slows down into a 1.0 speed because the third marker isn't set into anything. It's just a 1.0 times speed. So that's normal speed. So that's basically a really basic rundown of how the Dolly mode system works. So now I'm gonna tell you how to actually position all of your markers to have the most efficient track possible, and you get to have the smoothest cinematic you can get, which is going to be really useful later on whenever you're actually motion tracking. So yeah, let's start that now, and you can just take your marker and just remove all. And starting from here, I'm gonna find the spot where I started running. So I would say right at this point. So now that we have it set and we found the spot where we actually start doing the action that we wanted to have in the cinematic, in the motion track, just for that little boost of specialness, I don't know, we can actually start putting down the markers in the places we want. So for example, I'm gonna let my guy go a little bit ahead, and I want to make sure that he's in frame. You want to make sure that like framing is your #1 priority, because you want to have everything visible right there. So you can see the guy at the bottom left and then the sun at the top, and this is just a really nice shot right here. So I can put my first marker down here, and what I'm gonna do is, as you can see the flares right there, I'm gonna go back to that first marker actually, and you're gonna disable the HUD obviously whenever you're gonna start recording it, but you're gonna play it and then you're gonna follow the guy, and you want to try to stay at the same distance away from the guy as you are in the first from the first marker. So say this distance right here between the guy and the first marker, you want to try to stay that distance so it looks even, and so it looks pretty precise whenever you're actually recording the Dolly mode. So what you want to do is just hit play, and you want to follow the guy as best as you can and stay the same distance, and maybe you might need to pause it every once in a while and put down your markers wherever you want. I'm not going to follow the guy all the way down this hill, but I'm going to go and turn left, or I mean right, and go into that cave over there. So I want to keep it the same speed. I want to keep this whole thing the same speed, so it looks smooth and so it doesn't jitter or it doesn't do anything that will make it look bad, and that'll make it even worse for tracking. So I'm gonna have it here, and I'm gonna go the same speed that I was going when I was following the guy. Don't worry about the positions of the actual markers, because you could just reposition them later, and by repositioning them, you could actually have more control into it, and it will make it actually just a lot smoother. You could control where it's going. For example, right there, how it clips into the ground. Obviously, you don't want that to happen. So it's pretty simple. When you're going through the Dolly camera, you could see a preview of what your cinematic will look like, and obviously you don't want that. So you can just reposition this. Say I want this to be higher. You want to keep it in the same general area, of course, so it stays the same speed. And so I'm gonna move this maybe not that high, maybe like right here, and that fixes it. And you can see when we go to the first marker, it follows this path, and as you can see at the top left, it follows that path, reaches the second one, and it goes over there, follows and hits the third, then follows and hits the fourth, all at pretty even speed. And then it goes here into this clearing, and I want to make sure actually that this clearing is visible, because I'm going to have some more motion tracked text right here at the spot. So that's pretty smooth, honestly. You want to make sure that it's not in the way of anything, that everything's visible, that your path isn't blocked off by anything like this. You might want to readjust your camera marker, because say this rock right here, it's in the way. So just to teach you the concept of it, I'm gonna reposition this fourth marker and move it maybe a little bit more here, and maybe take this fifth one and look more to the right. That way, whenever I actually go through it from the fourth marker, you could see that it goes through. It doesn't go through, or it doesn't show that rock like so much. So, however, it goes through this little patch of grass, which could mess up the track. So you might want to make a lot of adjustments into it. Maybe move it just a tiny bit upward, and it'll follow the track pretty well. Don't worry about it. Boujou's smart. It knows what it's doing. You just have to have a smooth track and not have a jitter whatsoever. And so, same thing that I taught you before. You could speed it up or slow it down. Do whatever with whatever section of your Dolly mode, and it's pretty useful to do, but I prefer to just go into After Effects later, and you could just speed it up or slow anything down with Twixtor. So yeah, it's pretty basic to do. You just make your path. Remember, with the edit camera mode, you just follow the person, and really quickly you could just put down and follow your path really fast, just like you would do in, say, any cinematic mode that doesn't have a dolly mode. But this time you could actually adjust your speed of it. You could adjust the speed of all of this, actually, say, because it's in manual. So remember that you could just do whatever speed you want. Say I'm going in the dolly camera, and I could barely hold down the right trigger, and it can just slow it down. You could have it really slow, and a slow cinematic would actually have a much better track. This is how people on PC that edit PC do it. This is how they get such amazing tracks, and like this is how they can do a bunch of stuff that's pretty impossible to do on console, because they slow it down so they have more frames to work with, to track with. So that's pretty useful. I'm gonna move this fourth one a little bit more to the left, just so it doesn't hit that rock, and I think it looks pretty good. Our dolly cam looks pretty good. It follows the path pretty even. The speed is pretty perfect, actually. So what I'm gonna do is just record it, and I'm gonna disable the HUD, press the left stick to toggle the controls, and right here, starting from here where the guy starts, you want to start recording. Obviously I'm already recording, so I'm just gonna start, and it's gonna follow the entire path. You could have text wherever you want, say in that entrance, in that cave entrance, and I'm gonna have some more text in that clearing right over there, and it's just gonna look so amazing because of the sun. This is pretty much the perfect scene for it. And so yeah, now that you have your cinematic, we can go on into actually putting it in After Effects and rendering it out for Boujou, and yeah, you could actually start the track from there. Alright guys, so you've recorded your cinematic out of your recording program, which is Total Media Extreme or ITV, whatever you use depending on your platform. But now you have it, and it should look something like this. Obviously it's not going to be the exact same track, but it should look smooth and quick and to the point. It should be all the same speed, so that Boujou doesn't have a tough time determining the track points. And everything should be in frame, so everything's visible, and Boujou can actually track everything, so you can have more track points, and everything looks smooth and nice. You want to make sure that you have room for everything to track. And so now what I'm going to do is import it into After Effects. So I'm going to make a new composition out of this cinematic, and the first thing you want to do is scrub through the first few seconds of the cinematic to find the point in time where you want the cinematics to start, where you want the motion track to start, which is usually the first part, the first moment when the camera actually starts moving and all the action gets going. So right here you can tell there's a pause, and then the camera actually starts moving right here. So I'm going to split that layer here at this point in time by using Control-Shift-D, and that splits that, so I could take the first part and delete it. I'm going to move this over, the entire cinematic over, and now you'll see that it starts from the first point where the camera starts moving, which is right here, and it all looks nice and clean, until the very end where the camera stops moving. So you want to trim that out too, to the point where the camera, right before the camera stops moving. So I'm going to move the marker right to that point, right around here, and I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D, and I'm going to delete that layer as well. So now you're going to move the work area end to the end of this layer, and right click the work area and hit Trim Comp to Work Area. This makes the composition only the length of the cinematic that we want, so it's all nice and clean. However, if you notice, there are black bars at the top and right of your cinematic, which is usually what the PVR does whenever you record anything. So to get rid of that, all you have to do is hit S to open up the scale and change that to 101%. This gets rid of the black bars and it makes it look a lot better, and it's very easy to do, and it makes it look that much better because yeah, it just does. So now you want to go into the composition settings by going to composition settings, and you want it to be 1280 by 720, obviously, so that it's in 720p, and you want to have the frame rate at 59.94 if you want to have a easier track. Like what 59.94 does is it has more frames in between it. So like say in Boujou, whenever you're actually tracking the frames, it's easier to track. Boujou recognizes more frames and it's a lot smoother to track. However, it also takes twice as long. So some people don't want that since it takes hours for them to track it. So you could also, if you prefer, render it out in 30 FPS, and there's really no difference. But for those more complex motion tracks, you want to have 59.94 because it can actually recognize more. But for simple motion tracks that are only a few seconds long, or that they don't have much movement in them, 30 FPS is fine because Boujou is pretty smart and it knows what it's doing. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to render out in 59.94 frames per second. So I'm going to hit OK, and now I'm going to go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and you're going to go into the output module and change the format down to PNG sequence. This is a sequence of images that is every single frame in your cinematic, and what this does is it helps Boujou recognize each and every frame very easily so that it's a faster, easier motion track. So that's very important. That's a very important step in rendering these. So you want to make sure compression is none and have all the default settings. Hit OK, and make sure you have a specific folder for your actual frames, or else, because what this does is it just makes a sequence of images, just hundreds and hundreds of images of every single frame in your cinematic. So make a new folder called frames, or F like I have here, frames, and this is going to hold all of your images of every single frame in the cinematic. So I'm going to name this cinematic and hit enter, and you want to make sure that you have these characters at the end of your file name. This is just a numbering system, so it helps Boujou recognize that yes, indeed, that is a PNG sequence that used to be a video. So it tells it that it's a video that's now a PNG sequence. So that's very important as well. Now that you have your render settings and everything set, you can hit render. Alright, so if you use Vegas for some reason and don't use After Effects, I'm going to show you right now how to actually render out your cinematic in Vegas into tracking frames for Boujou to use. So what you want to do is go into Vegas and import your cinematic and drag it down to the timeline. And the first thing you want to do is obviously right click it, go to Switches, Disable Resample. And then as you can see, it's a smooth cinematic. It's all nice and smooth, really nice movement. Everything's in frame, and everything's pretty perfect. So now what I'm gonna do is actually trim it down to the first point where the camera starts moving to the point where the camera stops moving, because I don't want this pause at the beginning and end of my cinematic. As you can see right here, there's just a pause and the camera's not even moving. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zoom in into the actual timeline, and I'm gonna find the first point the camera starts moving, which is around here. Right there, the camera starts moving. So I'm gonna hit S and delete the first part, which I split up, and I'm gonna zoom out just to see more of it, and I'm gonna go to the very end of the cinematic to the point where the camera stops moving. Well, just a little bit before that, which is right here. Here it's moving, and it stops right there. So I'm gonna go a little bit before that. I'm gonna hit S to split the clip, and I'm deleting the second part of it that's not even moving at all. So now I have the cinematic all nice and done here, but I also have black bars at the top and right, which is what the PVR records in. Like it does it whenever it records anything. So to fix that, you're gonna go into pan crop, and I'm gonna move this over by the corners to just pan over here to this corner. And all you have to do is just zoom into it, just scroll in, and move the corner of these two dotted lines. Move the corner down to where it doesn't overlap those black bars. And then after that, you'll see in the preview screen that it's cut out. So now that that's done, you could just hit X to just exit out of this. And now it's all done. It's all nice and cropped. You want to make sure that your actual selection things, the loop regions, actually all across your cinematic, all across the entire cinematic, so that it knows to render all of this. And as for project settings, I just have 1280 by 720 at 29 FPS. Something about FPS, whenever you're rendering frames, 59.94 is recommended so that you get the smoothest track possible. It's easier to track, and Boujou works harder to actually make sure that you get the best track that you can. But it also takes twice as long as rather than if you use 30 FPS or 29.97 FPS. So that's just your choice. This is used more for more complex cinematics, for more complex tracks where there's a lot of movement and stuff. But if you're using a cinematic that's just basic movement, there's not much to it, then 29.97 FPS or 30 FPS is just fine. But for this tutorial, I'm going to use 59.94 FPS, and you could just copy my settings right here. You don't need any audio settings, obviously, since it's only rendering pictures. So after you copy these, just hit apply and hit OK. And now you want to go into render as, and you want to find the section, the category of your rendering things. Since I use Vegas Pro 11, I'm pretty sure it's different than any other Vegas. So just try to find it. Try to find image sequence, and you want to choose the PNG image sequence. And there's no template to customize. It's just a basic sequence template. So after that, hit browse to choose your output folder. And you want to make sure that you have your own folder specifically for these frames, because what this does, what a PNG sequence is a sequence of images. It's a picture of every single frame in your cinematic, and Boujou will use those pictures to create a sequence in it, and it'll track a lot easier. It's a lot faster to track in Boujou, and so yeah, it's gonna get messy if you just save it to any folder at all. So make sure you make your own folder for it. And I'm just going to call this cinematic, and be sure that you choose PNG, obviously. Save it, and then you can just hit render, and it'll render out each and every frame. So guys, now that you've recorded your cinematic and you've rendered it out of After Effects or Vegas, you're left with this, which is a folder of every single frame that's in your cinematic. And so Boujou is going to recognize each and every single one of these frames as an entire video so that you can actually track it properly and without any issues, hopefully. So what you want to do in Boujou, first thing you want to do is import sequence. And you want to go to the folder where that sequence is located, and for me that's in my motion track tutorial cinematic folder, once again in the F folder. That's what I named it. So after that, you just select the very first one, the 00000, which is the very first frame, and just hit open, and it'll automatically import every single frame from that frame over to the last one. So make sure you hit your frame rate. And you have to do this twice for some reason. You have to put in your frame rate twice, because after you hit apply, all it does is just reset the frame rate. So make sure you change it back to 59.94 or whatever frame rate you use, and make sure that you do that and hit apply again and hit close. And now you can get into actually tracking it. I'm gonna put in an extra section right here to show an extra feature, which is polymasks. Polymasks are pretty much masks to let Boujou know what not to track. Everything in a polymask will not track at all. Like whenever you hit track features, it won't track at all. So say you have like a HUD or something, you're motion tracking like a first person HUD, you can use polymasks to mask that out. And it's pretty simple to use. You just hit add polymasks, and you just hit the first point, and you could hit the second one, third one, fourth one, and so on until you make your mask. You can't have any curves in it, but you could keyframe this by going to masks, and you could see mask 1, and everything inside of this green area will not track. So once again, if you had a HUD, say at the top left, right, and bottom left and right corners of your screen, you could mask those out really easily, just like that. So that's just a little bit more information. You want to make sure that you keyframe it if it's something like a person. Like say I don't want to track this person at all, then I could just move the actual mask around him, and I could keyframe this to go on through the entire track, just like that, and it will do it automatically. It fills in the frames between. So you could have like a really specific mask. And this is how people do those really intense motion tracks where you have like a lot going on, where if you've ever experienced this, you just have too much movement in it and too much is going on to even get a possible track for Cinema 4D. So this is how people do it. They use polymasks, which is a really useful feature. So for this cinematic, I don't need a polymask, so I'm just going to delete this mask right here. And I'm not gonna need one, so I'm just gonna go to track features, and I'm gonna do all frames right here, just sequence 1, all frames, and I'm gonna pump up the sensitivity. The sensitivity is pretty much what needs to be tracked. Like it makes it more sensitive, so it'll track more, it'll have more track points, and it'll take longer, but it's really useful if you have like a lot of movement. Once again, it makes it more sensitive. So you want to make sure that you have that, and then make sure you have all of these features, the default features, and you want to just hit start so that it'll track. So after Boujou is done processing your cinematic and it's tracked all of its features, you'll notice each and every single one of these points on your cinematic, which are each pretty much just features that Boujou has tracked to know where like pretty much where it is in the cinematic. So it's going to use these points to actually tell Boujou what movements have occurred in your cinematic. So using those, you want to go to Camera Solve, and what Camera Solve will do is it takes all of these points and it figures out the path that the camera went through to actually record the cinematic. So you want to go into Camera Solve and choose sequence 1, it should be that by default, and choose all frames, and you have to make sure that you hit optimize camera path smoothness. This smooths out the camera and pretty much does what it says. It just makes it so that the camera in Cinema 4D will look a lot smoother. So after that, you just want to hit start. So after it's done solving the camera, you'll notice all of these blue and yellow points in your cinematic that pretty much tell Boujou where everything is, and that all of these are objects in your cinematic and that all of them have depth. And you could see that by going into the 3D mode, where if you hold shift you can move the camera around and look around, and you could see the path that the camera takes, and each and every single blue point and yellow point are in the 2D mode, and it pretty much knows exactly where everything is, and it pretty much recreates a scene using points that you use to actually recognize the track. So as you can see, it goes through the entire scene, starting from, this is the start right here to the end. So using these points, you want to go into scene geometry, and by doing this you can define the floor that is in the cinematic. You could define that this ground right here is a floor, and you could tell it at exactly what angle the floor is at. So you want to go into scene geometry and add a new coordinate from hint, and you want to find 2 points in your ground, on the ground of the cinematic, 2 points that create a line that are pretty much perfectly left and right on the ground, pretty much like if you had a floor, if you had paper in front of you, just imagine this: if you're on a desk and you have paper in front of you, you would be choosing the 2 points, the 2 corners of that paper, of that square piece of paper. So you would choose that. Just visualize that. You will choose these 2 points as one of the corners of it, as the left and right edges of that paper, and you'll hit connect to selected, and you'll add another coordinate from hint. And what we're going to do is add a z-axis hint, which will tell it where, like, from your point of view, how far, like what angle the paper is at flat on a desk that's in front of you. So doing this, you're gonna obviously want it to be perfectly proportionate in the angle of the ground. So say I chose these 2 points, so I could also choose say this point and this point, because it's directly at that angle. If these 2 are the left and right edges, then these 2 would be the top and bottom edges, or it would be like, it would create that z-axis. So using that, I could choose these 2 actually, that would create a corner of the paper, and it would be right at the angle of the ground. It would be right at the level of the ground from the perspective that the camera is looking at. So you can choose those 2 and hit connect to selected. And after you have your 2 axis hints, you want to hit update coordinate frame, so it knows where the x and z axis are on your ground, so that it knows where the ground is. And you could hit that, hit close, and you could add a test object so that you could test out how well Boujou did in recognizing the ground. So you could see the blue recognizes, the blue stands for the z-axis and the red stands for the x-axis. So you could see it did a pretty good job in knowing that this is back and forth, and that the red is left and right, and it's perfectly level to the ground. So it's done a really great job. I like how this looks. It's perfectly tracked to this point right here, and it's done a really well job. So after that, you want to export the camera and export this as first cam, so that you know that this is the first one in your series of cameras that will be your multiple tracks, in like that will be your multiple texts. So this is for the first text, so you're going to call it first camera to know that it's the camera of the first one, obviously. And you're going to change all of these to sequence 1. It should be this by default, actually. Change this to Cinema 4D if you haven't already. Moving camera, static scene, and scale the scene by 100. This will make it so that it's easier to place all the text in Cinema 4D, so that everything's all evened out, and you pretty much have a really good, like, really perfectly sized units for your text. So after that, you want to hit save, and after you save it, be sure you save your Boujou file as well by just going to File, Save As, and save it as first track, so you know it's the track of the first one, just in case if you need to change the scene geometry or anything. If you need to adjust it just slightly, then you could just go back and change it. So I'm just going to save that, and then you're going to move on to the next one. So say I want to go ahead and go further into this cinematic, and I want to put text at the top of this staircase right here, right before we get into the cave. I know that there's a lot of points right here, but you could sort of see the shape. This is the cave right here, so I want to put text right here next to this wall. So I'm gonna just go into scene geometry, and all I have to do is just change this, and once again I'm gonna define the floor. So obviously I can't just select any points just like that, or else it's not gonna, that's not a floor. The triangle isn't a floor. Like, it's not gonna know that this is a square. So make sure that it's all like a 90-degree angle, as if you put a piece of paper on the ground and you actually notice that it makes a 90-degree angle. Just imagine that, and you'll pretty much be set, really. So I have these 2 points right here, which are pretty good, and for the z-axis I'm gonna choose these 2 points right here, which define the depth of it, which is forward and backwards. So I'm gonna update the coordinate frame, and I'm gonna hit close, add test objects, and it's a little off, but it's pretty good. It's in the right area, so I'm gonna fix that. You could adjust it at any time. All you have to do is delete that ladybug if you want, delete the test object, and I think I'm gonna change the z-axis so that maybe make a line more to the left, or I mean more to the right, so that it'll get a better angle of the ground. I'm gonna hit connect to selected, update coordinate frame, and this may take you a couple of tries to get down perfectly, but once you actually do, it will be a lot easier. It will, like, your track will look a lot better. So it's really useful to take your time with. Like, it's really worth it. It looks a lot better in the end. So yeah, I'm gonna fix this right here. Actually, I'm gonna fix this, maybe these 2 points, update coordinate frame, and I'm actually gonna change my x-axis over to maybe these 2 points, so that it knows that this is the z-axis and this is the x-axis. So I'm gonna hit close and add a test object, and that's a lot better now. It's pretty much perfectly on the ground. Obviously this is like a hill, so it's kind of angled, but we could fix that later in Cinema 4D. You could just position it better. You could spend more time to try and get it perfect, but it's not always going to be completely perfect. But that's alright, since you could just as long as it's in like that area, then it's pretty much alright. So you can do this and continue exporting the camera. I'm going to save this as second cam and scale scene by 100. Save. And I'm going to save as second track. And now I could do the third one, which I'll do really quick right here, just by defining this floor, which is pretty easy right in this clearing. I'm going to go to scene geometry, and I'm going to change them by selecting the x-axis. I'm just going to do it from this angle. Say I want text right in front of me, right here, right in front of these rocks. So I'm going to choose left and right, just to define it. That's at a left and right angle right there. So I'm going to connect those 2 points, and then I'm going to choose, hold on, I'm going to choose 2 points that are that are back and forth right here. So if these 2 are the x-axis, then the z-axis will be around there, like right there at that depth. So yeah, these 2 points will work. I'm going to connect them, update coordinate frame, hit close, add test object, and there it is. Boom. It's right there. It's recognized this plane as a floor, like this ground right here in the cinematic as a floor, because it knows all of these points are objects in it, and it knows exactly where they are. based on everything around it, because it's all based on relevance of each thing, such as the scene geometry is based on like these points right here, so it knows the depth of the floor. So now it knows this point, so in Cinema 4D we could just move it back and move it up, and just by positioning the text right, we could have it perfectly aligned, perfectly like straight up right there. Maybe we want it a little bit more back, but yeah, we could do this all in Cinema 4D, and as long as you have it good, you have a good scene geometry in Boujou, then you should be set for Cinema 4D. So once you have your cameras exported out of Boujou, your next step is to put them in Cinema 4D so you can actually put text on them and render them out. So you want to go to Cinema 4D and go to File, Open, and open up the first camera, which is the first section of your cinematic that you want to put text on. So when you do that, this window will come up, and you want to change the scale to 5 inches so that your grid in the background, as you can see here, is of this size or more or less this size, so that you don't have to scale up or down your text whenever you create it. So 5 inches works for me. You might need to change it, but for now I'm just going to hit OK, and you'll see that whenever you go through all of these frames, you actually have your entire camera's motion and it recognizes it. However, there is no background so that you know where everything is. So you want to make a new material, and you want to go into that material and disable specular and hit these 3 dots so you could actually find a texture for this material, and you want to open up the first frame of your cinematic that you rendered out of After Effects that you imported into Boujou. So I'm going to choose the first frame, I'm going to hit no for this window, and I'm going to click the location of this path to the actual frame, and I'm going to go into the animation tab, hit calculate, and what this does is it lets Cinema 4D know that all of those frames are one video, and it'll play out all of those frames throughout the entire span of time that your render will be. So now you can actually close out of that and go and make a new background with this menu, and once you make a new background, you'll want to apply the material of the cinematic to that background, and now as you can see, the entire cinematic plays out through the entire scene, and the camera path, or this grid, is in a pretty good spot in relation to it. So you can actually start putting text down at this origin point, which is essentially the center of everything of the entire cinematic of your entire scene in Cinema 4D. So I'm gonna go into MoGraph and I'm gonna put down MoText, and I'm gonna change this to something I want, which would be Ninja, for example. And whenever you're putting down text, you want to make sure that the placement of your text isn't colliding with anything in your scene. For example, right now, when I spawned it, whenever I created it, it's currently colliding with this rock right here, which doesn't make any sense because of depth. It's pretty much, it should be in the rock, but it isn't, because it's pretty much like an X-ray that's showing up through the rock, which doesn't really make any sense. So you want to either mask that out or just move the placement to somewhere else, such as if I move it to above my person right here, because I also don't want my soldier to actually run through the text and run into the text and just mess it up, which doesn't look very good at all. So you want to make sure of that, and also that it doesn't go through the ground, because a lot of people I see, they want to have their text sitting on the ground, but they have it so low that it just doesn't make any sense because of depth. Because this grid right here, this is the ground. This is what Cinema 4D recognizes as the ground, and the camera that goes past this grid will look as the ground. So everything that's on this grid that's directly above it will be above the ground. So say if I had my word right around here, and I'm actually going to scale this down because I don't want it to be so big. I could move it into a position with the arrows, with the XYZ axis arrows, into a position right in front of the rock so it's not colliding with the rock, and to the right of the soldier, so that it's not colliding with the soldier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the coordinate, the Y coordinate of the position to 0 centimeters so that it's sitting right on the ground. But you'll notice that this bottom part of the J is going through the ground, so you're going to have to want to fix that by either changing your font or just changing it to all capitals, or just putting it in a different spot in general. So I'm going to change it to all caps actually, and that looks pretty good right on that spot. You could tell when you play through it, that's directly on the ground. And say if I had it lower than that grid, then this just wouldn't make sense because it wouldn't look as well as it would. This is pretty much like this text should be underground, but we could see it, which doesn't make sense at all. So I'm actually going to put my text right above my soldier right here, and this is in a pretty good spot. It's pretty rotated. If you want to change the rotation or anything, you could do that with the rotation tool. You could just change how it looks. You want to make sure that it's also legible, that it's actually like your people are actually going to be able to read it. So right there, that looks pretty good. You don't want it to be obviously so rotated like that, unless that's your goal. But you want to make sure people can actually read it. So you could do that. And there's also other formatting options, such as aligning to the middle. So if you want to rotate it around the middle of the text, which is even more useful, you can do that. You also don't want your camera to go through your text. For example, I see this a lot in many people's edits, that in their motion track is perfect except for the fact that their camera goes through their text, and just like this, say this end right here of in the middle of the word ninja, the camera is going through this as the motion track continues. So it crashes through and it just keeps going, and this pretty much ruins the motion track because that's not real at all, and your goal is to make it as real as possible. So just take the extra effort to make sure that the camera is out of the way of your text. So if I play it right now, the J is still in the way of my text, so I'm going to move it even more, maybe so that it goes under the A, and that looks pretty good. If I go frame by frame here, you can see that it doesn't go through the A at all, and it'll just be a really intense close-up of the A, but it won't ever actually go through the A. You might have to keep doing this as you go on through designing your text, because your text might increase in size or whatever, but whenever you actually finally render out your cinematic, then you want to make sure that that the camera doesn't go through the text and that your text doesn't go through anything else. So now that you have your text all set up nice and neat, you want to start designing it, because right now if you render it out, it's going to look like a piece of crap. So the first thing you're obviously going to choose is your font. So make sure that you don't have a super overused font such as Typograph Pro. And I mean, it looks really good. It's a really good font, but honestly everyone uses it and it's just not special anymore. So try to use a different font that not many people use, and that looks good, that fits with your song choice or with your edit style. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to use one of the fonts I use, which is called NFS font, which is a font used in Need for Speed. The next thing I'm going to fix is the depth of my text. So depth is obviously like how thick it is, and so you want to make sure that your depth is not super long, like for example like this, because if I go around with this rotate tool to go around the text, you could see that it's really long and it doesn't look good like that, unless that's actually what you really want. But just having the depth of the text around, and pretty much actually as a guideline, like just about the width of one of the letters of the text. For example, from this point right here to this point right here, on this point of the A, You want to have it around that size. So for example, like this is a pretty good size from this perspective. So that looks pretty good. And now I'm gonna get into the caps, which will round out these edges. It'll have a border around the text, which makes it look a little bit better because it smooths out, it just rounds out those edges and it makes it look pretty clean and not as sharp and awkward. So just like that, just small caps would be good. Make sure they're fillet caps, and the radius of them will depending on what your camera is, like the scale of your camera. So you might have to play around with it. Just make sure you don't make them super big like this and not like so small that they're unnoticeable. Just 2 centimeters is fine for me for this right here, so that's what I'm gonna keep it as. In addition to caps, there's also different types of fillets, which is the border around the text, and they all have different uses, but I'm gonna show you guys what the general ones are. So for example, linear is just like this. It's rounded, just pretty much straight. Well, it's not exactly rounded, but it's just flat like that. And convex is the same, but for different uses. Concave as well. Half circle is just a flat border, just like that, and it pushes the text in, and it's a flat border, pretty much nothing to it. You can see the outline of it right there. One step is just the text border, the fillets being engraved, or like they're pretty much indented into the text, and just by a short amount. 2 steps is doing that twice, and engraved is the text going into the fillets, which makes it have an engraved look. So yeah, pretty straightforward. For this tutorial, I'm gonna use linear caps just because they're the easiest to use, they're the most generic, and yeah, they look really nice in most motion tracks. So now we can get into materials. So now that you have your text all in a nice spot, it's gonna look like nothing at all. It's just gonna look like text whenever you render it out. So you want to start adding materials and lighting to it. So right now I'm gonna show you the most basic materials and lighting that I do, well, that I don't normally do, but it's just a really good way. It's really easy and fast and not so CPU intensive. So the first thing I'm gonna start off with is lights. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a new light by hitting the light icon, and I'm going to position this light over to the right of the text, in front of the text, right under the text, because the camera from this point of view is under the text. So as you can see, the bottom of the text shows up, or the bottom of the sides show up. So I'm going to position this light maybe higher than the camera, or maybe lower than the text, and I'm going to move it off to the right. And I'm not only going to use one light, I'm going to use 2, because I want my light to be more spread out across my text, and I don't want it to be so concentrated on only one portion of the text. So 2 lights usually does the job, or you could also use 3 lights that are really far away from the text, so that you have a really nice even spread out light. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy and paste this light, and I'm gonna move the second one over to the right. And right there you can see that it's pretty spread out pretty evenly, and I'm actually going to move the first light more to the right, and that looks pretty spread out. Whenever you render this out, it's just going to be gray. There's no materials or anything. So to make a new material, you're going to go into the material box and double click, and I'm going to double click this material to edit it. I'm gonna disable specular first of all, because all specular does is it just adds a really bright white like shine on it, which looks bad. So disable that. So go into the color tab, and I'm gonna change my color of the material to something that is similar to the environment in the cinematic. So for example, there are a lot of brown colors in this cinematic. There's browns and oranges on the rocks and the ground, and there's also green right here on the leaves of the tree. So I'm gonna make my text pretty orangey. So I'm gonna go into the orange, I'm gonna change it and make it have an orange hue, and I'm gonna desaturate this actually because the map isn't so saturated. It's pretty desaturated because it's not super colorful, so I'm gonna make it not super desaturated like that, but maybe something around there. And I don't want to make it too bright, but I don't want to make it too dark either, so something around the middle will work. And that looks pretty good, kind of an orange color. Maybe make it a little brighter. And I'm gonna enable reflections on it, obviously, because I do want reflections. And I'm gonna change the color of my reflections to something that's similar to the color in the color tab, so that your reflections will actually look similar to your text. So I'm gonna change it not to the exact same color, but to the maybe same hue, and I'm gonna go and change it to make it really bright, maybe a white, really light brown or orange, and that looks pretty good. And if I disable, or if I lower down the brightness of this reflection to around, say, 65, that looks pretty good. That's a really well reflective material, and I could apply this to my text. But if I render this out, you'll notice that it's not reflective at all. It's not reflecting anything. So to do that, you're gonna want to make a skybox, which is my main way of making text reflective and looking good. So to make a skybox, you want to go and make a new sphere, and you want to position this sphere in the middle, right in the middle of your text, so that whenever you scale it up, it will actually it'll like overlap the entire text. So I'm gonna make this bigger so that it like covers up the entire text, and I'm gonna add the cinematic texture to this sphere, and I'm gonna change its production to spherical, and I'm gonna add a tag, Cinema 4D tags. I'm gonna add a compositing tag, and disable cast shadows and receive shadows, so that it doesn't cast or receive any shadows onto the text that were made by the light. Disable scene by camera, and enable compositing background. So scene by camera, it'll make it so that it's not, whenever you render it out, it's there as in the reflections will see it, but it won't be like it won't be in the way of the text, and it won't show up like as an object. So that looks pretty good. Whenever you render it out, the reflections look pretty good. They're pretty uneven, however. They're more on the sides of the text, on the left side. So you might need to mess around with the positions of the lights. By the way, of the sphere, to disable it from your editing view, so that it's still there whenever you render it out, but it's not in your way right here in your editing view, you could disable that by double clicking the top dot of these two dots right here on the sphere object. You could double click the top dot and it'll make it red, and you can tell that it's just gone, it's out of the way. So you can actually change your text around, and if you want it back, you could just disable that and make it have no color, and you could change the position of the text or whatever you want of the text. So I'm gonna have that out of the way, and I'm gonna see my text, and that looks pretty good. There's nice reflections on it, but I don't want it to be so bland to where like it's all one color. I want it to have more materials to it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a new material, and it's gonna be black. So I'm actually gonna just copy paste this material, which is the orange material that I have on the text, and I'm gonna change the color of this material to black. And I'm gonna change the reflection color to this type of gray, maybe a not super white, but pretty gray, maybe a little lower. And the brightness will be fine, or you could lower it if you want. It really doesn't matter. You just want it to be looking pretty reflective. So what I'm gonna do is add it to the sides of my text, and only to my sides. I don't want it to show up in front of my text. I only want it to be on the sides. So to do this, I'm going to add my black material over to my text, and the black will, if you render this out, the black will be all across the entire text. So you want to move the orange material to the right of the black material, and go into the orange material and type in the selection part of this, you want to type in C1, and that'll make the orange only appear on the front of the text, and it won't appear on the sides. So when you render this out, you can see that it's pretty reflective. It's really reflective actually, and the orange only shows up on the front, and there is black on the side. So the text actually stands out more, and you could actually read it a lot better. And if you want, you can lower down the reflections so they're not as powerful. It's entirely your choice. I am just teaching you concepts. So you can see there that that's less reflective, and that looks a little bit better, and that still looks pretty good. And whenever you go across this text, you can see that the reflections will be noticeable, and they'll move along as the camera moves. And you could actually increase the reflection of this as well, maybe 85 or 84, and you can see that the reflections actually do show up a lot better than they would if you just applied the reflection texture to the cinematic texture to the reflection. So it looks really good like that, using a sphere to act as a skybox, act as a reflection. So now that we have that, I'm gonna actually get into advanced lighting and materials, which is my main way. I use it really often. I use it in every single one of my motion tracks, and it makes text look so amazing. And so that'll be in the next part, which is using my softbox slash material pack slash SoaR logo pack. So that's next. So I'm gonna change the text right now into an actually well-made text. So I'm gonna delete these materials, and I'm gonna import my SoaR logo plus Lightroom plus material pack, which I got from a SoaR member. And I'm gonna, right from the start, right after you import it through File Merge, you could tell that there's a lot of materials that it brings. And if you zoom out, you could notice the skyboxes in it, which are on the top and right and in front. Right there is one that's in front of the actual text. And there's also a SoaR logo here, which is pretty much the center of the skybox, and it should be where you want to position your text. However, you don't want to position your text to the SoaR logo. You want to position the SoaR logo to the text. So, well, everything including the skyboxes and everything, so that you have proper lighting, and it just makes it look a lot better. So you want to move that into position just by moving it back and down and to the left, or wherever you're actually positioning your text. And I'm going to move it up, and obviously you could tell that the SoaR logo is way too big for this text, so I'm going to scale everything down. But first, I'm gonna actually group all of these, and to do that, you're gonna click the bottom light that the Lightroom brings. Actually, these two are my lights, so I'm gonna delete those first. And you're gonna choose the bottom group of lights, which this is the most bottom thing that the Lightroom brings. And you're gonna hold Shift and click the top one, and you're gonna group it by pressing Alt G on a PC. And that groups them, so you could name this something like, say, Lightroom. Once you select this Lightroom group, you'll be selecting everything that's inside of it, including the SoaR logo and pretty much everything. So you can move it all at once, and I'm gonna scale it down all at once by using the scale tool right here. And I'm gonna scale it down until the SoaR logo is just about the size of my text. So that's a pretty good size, and it's pretty much in position. You can move it in. You can see that it's not properly rotated, but it shouldn't make too much of a difference. But if you want to get super specific, you can, and just copy and paste the right rotation so that it's rotated right, so that it can actually be at the perfect angle. But right there is about good. So the SoaR logo is the same size as the text, sort of, more or less. And if I render this out right now, you could see that it has no effect whatsoever, and there's this box right here, depending on the angle you're viewing this at. So because this is such a GPU intensive like method for text, you always have to have global illumination. It's not recommended, it's just pretty much required. And in global illumination, it just makes your lights and materials and reflections just look so much better. It does something, I'm not sure exactly what, but it just does. So obviously if you render it out, you can see, boom, it's super shiny. It makes the text look super reflective, and you could tell by like like the edges of it are just really nice and bright. You still have those soft boxes here which are visible, but you could change that. All you have to do is just go to lights and add a Cinema 4D tag, and I'm actually going to do this for you, so don't worry about it. I'm going to save it so you don't have to do this. I'm just going to disable scene by camera on these lights so that you don't see them in the final render. And so I'm actually going to delete the SoaR logo. Well, not delete it, I'm just going to take it out of view so it's not like in our way, because I don't really want the SoaR logo right there in my scene right here. I just want the text. So as you can see right now, it's materialless, it's just plain white, but you can see there's a bunch of materials down in the material pack in your material box. So I'm going to take the material. This is a material, Mat 1 is a material that the SoaR logo used. So I'm going to take that and drag it to my text. And if I render that out, you can see that it's blue and it's nice and shiny, but there's not really a lot of reflections on it. So you can change that as well by going into the material editor of that material, and you can change the brightness and whatnot of it. You might want to take off Fresnel so that the front of the text can have some reflections as well, and you want to make them brighter. And the reflection, make sure that it's kind of like not super dark, or else it's not really that noticeable. You want it to be sort of like bright again. You want it to be bright and colored, but not super dark and not super white or colored. You want it to be like that, and that gives it a pretty nice reflection. You could also change the color, and if you change the color, be sure to have the same hue for your color and for your reflection. So say I wanted to turn it to green, this green right here, I could hit OK on this, and I would have to have that same hue of green, which is exactly this. So that'll make it blend in more. But I'm gonna undo that because I want it to be orange actually. So I'm gonna change it to orange, and also change the reflection. And once again, I can mess around with the reflection. I'm gonna make it a little bit brighter, like around there, and I could make the reflections higher by giving it a brighter brightness. And so using that, if I render this out right now, it should look extremely well. So right there, you could tell that it's just pretty much perfect, and the shine on it, the color of it is perfect. There wasn't any reflections because I accidentally moved my sphere for some reason. Somewhere it just moved by itself, I guess. I'm not sure. But right now, those reflections are a little bit too strong for me. So I'm going to tone them down just by maybe turning down the brightness and lowering the brightness of the reflection. But the sphere is in a good spot. Remember that it's a skybox and it has the texture of the actual cinematic. So when you actually render it out, it should look pretty good. That's a really nice dark gold, and actually I'm gonna probably make it a little bit brighter because that's a little bit too dark for me. And let me check that this is all fine, and yep, okay. So then you turn on specular, and whenever you render it out, it should look pretty good. However, it looks really too orange, so I'm gonna put an outline on my text just like I did with my old material, which was really the most basic material you could use. So what I'm gonna do is just add another black, maybe this glossy black material, to my text, and I'm gonna move over the orange material to the front, right in front, to the right of the black material, and I'm gonna type in C1 in the selection part of the tag tab, and what this will do is make the sides of the text black, so it's not super orange, and it gives it just a really nice orange look. So this looks pretty good right here. And remember that you can always change the caps, just in case you want to change the caps. If you want to make them bigger and more noticeable, you could do that, and it'll affect the sides of the actual text as well. So right there, that looks pretty reflective and pretty nice. You could boost that up. I'm actually going to do that right now. Maybe make the reflections a little bit like grayer and more pale, and leave the color the same. Actually, I'm gonna turn the color, maybe make it a little bit more paler to desaturate it, so that it goes more with the environment. So right there, that is actually perfect. I really like that reflection, and because it's linked to the cinematic, it goes through as you go through it. It'll be affected by the cinematic, or it'll be by, like, it'll move with the cinematic as the cinematic goes through. And so I'm also going to make sure that it's not actually in the way of the camera. So I'm going to position it even better by I'm going to move it up actually, and that's out of the way. So yeah, that's fine. So now that it's perfectly designed, the reflections are pretty much perfect, you can now start rendering it. So when you're ready to render, well, this will be after you do all of your texts. So because right now you just want to render this out, well, you want to save this, and I'm just gonna name this say Ninja, and I'm just gonna save it here, and this is just my Ninja, and I'm actually gonna call this first text, so I know that this is the first text, like the first Cinema 4D file of the first text that is in my final motion track. So I'm going to save that, and now that I have that saved, I can move on to my second camera, and this is pretty much just starting over. So what I'm going to show you guys right now is actually how to have shadows on your text that's close to the ground or on the ground. And as you can see here, my text is at coordinate 0 on the y-axis, so it's right on the ground. And if I render this out, it's going to have all the reflections and everything, because I already have my scene set with my 2 lights, and I'm just using the most basic type of materials and lightings that I could use. So obviously I want to have shadows on this ground, and to do that I'm going to have to enable shadows on my 2 lights by going into the shadow tag on both of them, and I'm going to make them have a shadow map soft, and I'm going to change the density to 80, which is normally a pretty good density for shadows on Call of Duty maps. So if I render this out right now, it's not going to have any shadows at all, and that's because there's nothing for it to cast shadows on. So if I go into my planes, into my shapes, I can make a plane, and this plane will act as the actual floor in which the text will cast shadows on. So I'm actually going to resize it because I don't need a plane this big, and I'm just going to make it more narrow and position it more maybe to the center of the text, because I want my shadows to be right under the text, right like behind the text. And because you can see here as I rotate around, the lights, my 2 lights, are right in front of the text, above the text, so that the shadows will come down. Well, the light will come down and the shadows will be cast right behind this text, or like right on the sides of it, and it'll blend in more with the environment. And I'm actually going to change the position of my text a little bit higher because my caps are clipping through the floor. So I'm just going to raise that up a bit, maybe so 3 centimeters, so that it doesn't clip through the ground. And if I render this out right now, you'll see that it's just a gray square that's on the ground, but there are shadows on it. And you can see that the shadows might go through, because they're kind of wide. They might go past that square, so you can resize that as well. And I'm actually going to make this more narrow on the z-axis, and that is a pretty good size for my plane, but I still want it to be textured. So I'm going to add my cinematic texture onto this plane, and I'm going to change the projection to frontal, and I'm also going to add a compositing tag, and I'm going to add compositing background to it so that it will not that the entire cinematic, the entire floor will blend in with the background. It will look the same as the background, because if I don't have that compositing background check mark, then you can see here that there's a line right here. This is the end of the plane, and this because the light will affect the plane. So make sure you have that enabled so that it all looks the same and it looks all blended in. And that looks pretty good right there, actually. You can see the shadows that are on the right below the text, and that looks pretty blended in. You can see the reflections as well. My lights are in a good position. You could change the position of the light as well if you wanted to have your shadows further back behind the text or more in front of the text. Your shadows mostly depend on your position of the lights. So if I have them both right above the text and farther away, you can see that there's more shadows that are in front of the text from this point of view. And if I go back to this point of view, you can see that there's shadows. Yes, they're right above the text, but there's no light coming in from the front. So you have to actually truly mess around with this so that you can get the shadows that you want and the lighting that you need. So yeah, that looks pretty good. And now I can get into actually starting my third text so that I can actually go and finish that and render out all of my motion tracked texts out of Cinema 4D. So guys, as you can see, I have finished my third and final text in my motion track, and it's in a really great spot. I love the spot, this clearing right here. It's just a really nice spot. The cinematics all smooth, and I'm just pretty much summarizing what I pretty much think about this. Is just final thoughts. If I render this out, you will notice that I have a different material on the sides of this text, and that is because I wanted to show you guys this material that the pack that the material pack slash SoaR logo slash Lightroom brought, which is a metal, really nice reflective material. And as you can see, it's really looking nice on the sides of the text, really looking so great with the reflections, and also the reflections of the red material, which is just a basic modification of this blue material right here. All I did was just make the red reflection brighter, and I changed the color to a darker red, and the specular is pretty much the same. I just changed the width and fall off a little bit. That won't make too much of a difference. You could just disable that in general if you want. It's your choice, but it looks really great. And another side material that I wanted to show you guys was actually a white material I also made that I'm going to include in the Lightroom material pack thing. And this is just going to be a white material just like I'm making right here. And it's going to look really great on the sides. I'm going to bump up the reflections too, actually. And it's going to look really great on the sides because it's just white and it makes it look really clean. As I'm going to render out right here, you'll notice it, and it just looks really nice with the shadows and everything. They stand out more. As you can see right there on the end, you can see the shadows here, everything on the O too. Keep in mind, this isn't even with ambient occlusion, which strengthens those shadows and makes them look nicer. This is only with global illumination, so it looks really nice just like that. So yeah, that's just a concept that it's your choice. Get creative with it. Just don't make clashing colors that look ugly. You want to make sure that it looks blending in with the map. And that's pretty much it, guys. That pretty much concludes this designing portion of your motion tracked text. And so now we can actually get into the rendering, which will take quite a while. So I have all of my texts already finished. I have my first text and my second text and my third text all ready to render out. So I'm going to go to my first text and I'm going to change the render settings to my basic render settings, which is pretty, like, they're just basic to render out. And so in the alpha tab, what you want to change is the frame range, which is the range that it's going to render out. So you want this frame range to be from the first frame that you see the text. In this case, in the first project, it'll be the very first frame that is in this project, and I'm gonna change the 2 to the last frame that you actually see the text, so, or a little bit past that, because I don't want to render out all of this. I'm not gonna render out all of these frames because that'll just be empty space and the text isn't even in this space. So I'm gonna change it to 160, which I already have here actually, and at frame 160 you don't even see the text anymore because it flies past it, and at 160 you don't even see the text. So I changed that to 160, and in the save tab you want to change the file location to save at to wherever you want to save it, and you want to make sure that the format is QuickTime Movie. This is important because it's the best format, and it also uses the alpha channel, which you also want to enable. And alpha channel is really important because whenever you composite your text in After Effects, it'll be transparent behind the text, and you could actually stack up the text without having to mask them out or whatever, without having too much trouble. So you want to make sure that alpha channel is always checked. If you don't want it, then don't worry about it. Just have it check marked, because in After Effects, as I'll show you later, you could still disable it so that you'll have your background. Otherwise, then yeah, just always have it enabled. And in QuickTime Movie options, you want to have compression type animation, 59.94 frames per second, or 29.97 frames per second, or 30, depending on whatever you rendered out in Cinema or in After Effects. And keyframe every 30 frames, doesn't really matter. Leave everything else the same. Include sound if you have sound, if you're that advanced into it. Yeah, so after that, multipass, you don't need anything here unless you actually know what you're doing. And anti-aliasing, you want to set it to best and set the minimum level to 2x2 and the maximum level to 4x4, and leave everything else the same. And what anti-aliasing does is it's very important because it smooths out the edges of your text so that it blends in more with the environment, or it blends in more with your background. So it's not super sharp, it just smooths the edges out, which looks a lot better. And so yeah, that's very important to have. So make sure you have it at best and have these settings. And you don't need to change anything in options, and you don't need stereoscopic because this is for 3D videos, and obviously your cinematic, your recording is only one dimension. So global illumination is obviously required for this setup of my softbox and my materials because it improves the lighting of the softboxes so that it improves. I don't know what it does, but it just makes the softboxes actually work. So make sure you have that on if you're using my softbox pack thing. And ambient occlusion you never need to have enabled, but it's entirely optional. What it does is it emphasizes the shadows on text, so the shadows stand out more, and it makes every edge of your text look a lot better. But it's really barely noticeable whenever you add color correction to it, which is the reason why I don't use it so often. So it's entirely optional. If you have text on the shadow, or if you have shadows on the text, like on text that's on the ground, it'll make it more noticeable and make it look a lot more realistic. But otherwise you don't really need it. And yeah, so it just adds render time, so I never really use it. So yeah, you don't need to have that enabled. And once you have that done, you want to render it out, not using this render to picture viewer option. You want to actually add it to the render queue so that you can actually render them out all at once. You can render all of them out overnight. So you want to go into that icon and go to add to render queue, and I'm gonna save the changes obviously because I changed the render settings, and you're gonna see that it appears as an error because I'm missing files. Don't worry about that, that's just some missing materials in the material pack, but you're not using any of them. so don't worry about that. And so now that I've added the first project, I can go on to the second one, and I can change the render settings in this, which I already did. I set the frame range from 260 to 555, which is the exact frame range that the text appears in. So you can see at 260 the text appears, or the text starts to appear, and I'm gonna have to mask all of this out later on in After Effects, but that won't be too hard. So I'm gonna render out all of this so the text shows up, and then presents appears and it goes past it, and at 555 you don't see the text anymore. And I have all of these options the same, QuickTime Movie and whatever, anti-aliasing, and all the options the same. And so after that, you could add it to the render queue, and I'm going to do the same for the third one, which also uses my entire softbox setup, and I'm going to add it to the render queue, and I'm going to save the changes, and there we go. Now I have all of them here, and to actually start the job of rendering, you can just go to Jobs, Start Rendering. And right now, when they're all in your actual render queue, you could actually still edit them. You could change them around in the projects themselves, and it'll render out the exact render settings that you specified. So you could change the materials or whatever, any final changes that you want to make, you could still do that. And whenever you're done with that, you could actually go to Jobs and start rendering. Okay, so you finally have your text all rendered out and ready to import in After Effects, so you can put them together in a composition. So later you could put them into your edit and seamlessly do whatever you want. So in After Effects, the first thing I'm going to do is actually import the background, which is all of the tracking frames, and all you have to do is just import the very first one. And if you have PNG sequence checkmarked right here, then it will import all of these as one footage. So I'm just going to import the first one, and before I put it into a composition, I'm going to right click it and go to interpret footage and go to main. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 59.94 frames per second, because for some reason, if you remember back to when I rendered out the cinematic into the frames, I rendered it out in a composition that was 59.94. But After Effects sets it back to 30 frames per second, so I'm just going to fix that. And if I just hit OK, then it'll make it 59.94 frames per second. And so I could just make this into a new composition. So what you're going to do now after you import your cinematic is actually import your text. So I'm just going to go into my folder and I'm just going to import all of these, and this window will come up which lets After Effects know that it has a transparent background. So you want to make sure that you have straight unmatted. If you had ignore, then that would just have the text with the background with the cinematic, and if you had that, then you couldn't really stack the texts like in layers. So it's always good to have it at straight unmatted if you have a background cinematic layer like I do right here. So I'm just going to put straight unmatted for all of them, and that's already the default. So now I have them imported, and if I had my Ninja text, and just to show it as an example, if you had that alpha channel checkbox check marked in Cinema 4D, whenever you rendered it, it will be transparent, and if I disable the background layer, then you could see that I can move this around and it's only the text, it's not the background at all. So I could have this, and this is really useful if you wanted to stack texts. For example, in my Just Like Baz episode edit, that's exactly what I did. I just stacked the texts on top of each other and had the backgrounds in the back behind them. And so yeah, so I'm gonna organize all of these texts into my composition. So starting with my first one, which is Ninja, this starts off at the very beginning. It's visible from the very beginning of the cinematic. So I'm just gonna snap it to the very beginning just like that, and it has no issues, as you can see, and I don't really need to mask anything out because the environment is not covering any of it. So I'm going to move on to my next text, which is Presents, and this is going to have some issues because it's in the middle of the cinematic, and I don't really have a frame to snap it to. Like, I can't snap it to anything unless I actually know the specific frame that the cinematic, or that the text should start in, which in my case would be 260, because if you remember in Cinema 4D, I started the frame range from frame 260. So I'm going to snap it to frame 260, as you can see here, and it should play out fine. You can see the text already right there, and I just need to mask that out, and it looks pretty good. The floor is covering up the bottom half because it's at the top of the staircase, so it looks pretty good. I don't need to mask out the bottom. The only thing I would need to mask out here would be this rock right here and maybe some of this bush. So I'm going to do that real quick, which won't take too long because of keyframing. It makes it really simple. So I'm just going to zoom in here so I could note this. I'm going to take the pen tool and I'm just going to make a really quick path right around the rock. Maybe just like this. Won't be too hard to do. And just a basic shape around that rock. It doesn't have to be too specific because all that I need to mask out is the end of the text. Well, right now at this point in time, it's going to mask out the entire all of this text. So now I have a mask that goes around it, but I need to subtract this area of the mask. So I'm gonna go to my presents layer, and I'm gonna hit M to open up the mask options, and I'm going to change the mask type to subtract. So it subtracts this area from the layer, and after that I'm going to keyframe my mask path, and I'm going to go ahead in time until maybe a reasonable point, maybe a couple frames ahead, like this, and I'm going to just select all of my points by holding Control, and I'm just going to select all of my points, and by holding Control I could click it and this just drag it around, and I'm just going to mask out this text by just moving the mask right along the side of the border, and as you can see, it masks it out pretty well. You can see that the mask did a good job in covering that up, so it looks pretty realistic with the border covering it. So I'm gonna move ahead some more frames, and I might need to scale this mask up actually, so I'm going to take all of these, and I'm going to take my pencil, and I'm going to double click, hold shift or hold control and double click my mask so I could scale it up, since there's more it's more close up to the actual rock or the boulder. So I could just move this into place here, and I could go in some more frames, and I could actually right here at this point in time, the boulder is out of the way completely, so I don't need to do anything here. I'm gonna go back actually, and right here you can see that there's a bush, and I do want this bush to cover up my text a little bit, just a little bit, maybe with a fade at the edge of it so it's slightly visible, but it's not going to show up too much in the final product. So I'm just going to go ahead and move ahead to right here where it would still be covering it, and I'm going to double click this to move it, and I'm just going to move my mask to go right along this bush, because it'll just be a pretty seamless transition from the boulder to the bush. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Maybe go in between the two keyframes, and I'm just going to move this around so I can actually have this, and there we go. Now at this keyframe, this is the last keyframe I made, I'm going to move ahead in frames until a point where I could actually see the text and it shouldn't be covered by anything. So this looks like a pretty good point, so I'm going to double click my mask, and I'm going to move it out of the way just to the point where my bush is, right there, and automatically it should be pretty good. You might have to go back and just try to fix it up and fill in the gaps between the keyframes, just so that you can make it even more looking good, more realistic and looking good. And that looks pretty well right there. You can see that at this point right here where it cuts off the text, it is a little choppy. So what I'm going to do is actually fade in the or make a feather on the mask, but I'm not going to have a feather on the mask right here at the boulder, because the boulder, you're not supposed to see anything through that boulder. So I'm going to do it just whenever the mask goes into, or the mask covers up that bush. So I'm gonna go in and hit this arrow so I could open up the more mask options, And at this mask feather, I'm going to keyframe this, maybe around here, wherever it starts to move into the bush. And you could spend a lot of time on this. I'm not going to spend too much because it's just to show you guys the actual idea of masking and feathering, so that stuff like this, like a bush, you can make it look better, and you can make the text see-through or through this bush. And you could adjust the keyframe points if you wanted to, just so that it'll look a little bit more realistic, or just better in general, because it'll cover it up. And that looks pretty good. As you can see, this bush right here is covering up this text just slightly, and I might have to move this line right here of the mask, and that looks pretty good. If I go here, then yeah, that's pretty feathered. You can tell that's a really great mask. And right here, I'm actually going to have to improve the points, because there's still there's a really big gap. So I'm gonna have to fill in those points by just moving the mask over, so After Effects knows where the boulder is and where the text should be covered up. So I'm gonna move it there, and actually that's actually the wrong spot. I'm going to move it lower down, so this top part is the part that's covering up the text. So I'm going to move that there, and maybe go back a few frames, go between all of the keyframes, just to make sure that all of the text is covered up for most of the frames. If it's not covered up for like one frame, it won't really matter. It doesn't have to be so super specific, but just to make it as real as possible, try to make it look like it's covered up by that boulder. So right here, I can move the mask over, and right here there's a really big gap, so I'm gonna move the mask over right here. Just move that over, double click, and just move it over, and just go between each space to cover up the text, so that whenever I finally go through and just do a final scrub through it all, that it actually seems pretty real, and like this boulder covers up the text. So that looks pretty good, and yeah, that looks pretty perfect actually. Looks great. It's covered up by the boulder, or by this rock right here. Then whenever it gets into this bush, the bush covers it up. I can actually adjust a little bit right here maybe, because the bush starts to cover it a little bit earlier. So yeah, maybe move the fade back. So right here, throughout all of this space of time, there is no feather at all, because the boulder is just one solid object. And right here, when the mask starts to reach this bush, it starts to have a feather, because the bush is actually somewhat see-through, so you want to keep it pretty realistic. And so you can see that's pretty real. That looks pretty good. And might need to adjust the mask a little bit. You can spend a lot of time with this, but if you're just if you actually have the time, I recommend that you do, because it makes your motion track look 10 million times better if you actually mask it correctly. And so definitely do it if you have the time. So I'm just gonna move that mask there, and that actually looks pretty good. If I zoom out, I can RAM preview this, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. And there we go, that's pretty good. It's at a good speed, and the mask covers it up really well. If I just go through this, you can see the mask changes, so it covers it up really well. And yeah, that looks really great. So now I can move on to my third text, which doesn't need as much masking, because it's only covered by, I think, this boulder right here, or this rock, this wall. So I'm just going to do that real quick by just dragging it on. And I already know that the last frame of this text will be at the very end of my cinematic, so I'm just going to drag that to the very end, and that will already be in place in the perfect spot. So right there, you can see it. And I need to mask out from this point, or from the very beginning of this text, where the boulder covers, or this wall covers all of it, to the point where you should be able to see all of the text without anything blocking it. So that would be around that frame, and yeah, that looks pretty, yeah, that's good. So I'm just gonna split the clip right here with Control-Shift-D, and I will only need a mask for this spot right here. So I'm just gonna make a mask and keyframe the mask so it covers up the entire wall. So I'm gonna do that. This wall is a little bit jagged, so I might need to move the keyframes around a little more, but I'll try to do that. Just mask the path, or keyframe the mask path, and I'm gonna move this around. There's a lot of specific points, so this is a little bit harder, but if you're doing, say, like a wall, or like, yeah, a wall, that'll just be a straight line, so that would be a lot easier than what I'm trying to do right here. But nonetheless, it's the same process, and it just depends on how realistic you want it. And I'm going to change this to subtract actually, and I can go in, and for these spaces, a lot of people have spaces between their text and their mask. Make sure you get them as close to the wall as possible, so I could just make this a little tighter, and that looks a lot better. You could actually even feather this out a little bit, say 3 pixels, so it just blends in more into the text, and I can keyframe some more of this, and this block, or this boulder, covers it from this point. So I'm just going to move the keyframes over to this, and which way. That looks pretty good. So now if I RAM preview this, it should look pretty good, and I could actually just examine it. So for any, I can examine it for any errors that I made through the masking, and I'm gonna render that. So that looks really great and realistic. This rock right here covers it pretty well, and the mask worked out really great in my opinion. And right whenever you get to this frame right here, the entire text is visible and it's not covered by anything, and then it goes into the sunlight right here and it looks really nice, and the text is just perfectly placed. So yeah, that pretty much concludes the compositing part, and this is going to be what it's going to look like all rendered out and all composited whenever it's rendered. So now I have all of my text all composited in one composition, and if I go back I could see that everything is looking pretty well, and I could look at my second text, it looks great, and my third text is masked pretty well on the sides. I actually did fix up the mask a little bit from the last section, if you were wondering, just to make it a little bit more specific, nothing too major. But I just wanted to add extra detail into it so it would look better, and so that looks pretty good in my opinion. And now you're ready to render it, or you could just add it into your actual edit, and all you have to do is just drag this composition into your edit, and it would just be one single track just like so, and you wouldn't have to worry about any other layers. It would just be one composition, which is usually what I do in my edits, just to keep everything in one project. Or you could just render this out by just going to this composition, and I'm just gonna go to composition, add to render queue, and I'm gonna choose my render settings, which is normally if I wanted to do a quick render, I would do the format H.264, and in the format options I would have the profile on high and the level at 5.1, and the bitrate would be 10. And this is for quick render settings, but if you wanted to have a little bit more quality, you could bump this up to say 20 or maybe 50. But don't get super high, or else it'll start taking a long time to render and it'll be a lot bigger of a file. So something around 10 or something. But that's just for a quick render for me. But you want to make sure you have audio output enabled if you actually have sounds going through it, like an intro or something, and you can just hit OK. But I actually mostly always use lossless, since I have such a big hard drive. I have a lot of space, and so I can render lossless, and what that is it's zero quality loss at all. However, it creates a really large file, so it's not super ideal for people with computers with only like say 200 gigabytes of memory, or of hard drive space I mean. But I use lossless because I don't want to lose any quality in any of my cinematics, and after that it just creates one file, and I could just import it into my edit and just add it in really quick and do whatever I want to it, and whatever. So yeah, that's just a little quick tip on your render settings. So that's usually what I use if I just want to show people. I use my render settings, which is just the H.264, or I use my actual lossless, which always comes with After Effects, by the way. This is just the default thing, and it's not really a template that I made. It's just basic. It's AVI and nothing else really, no compression whatsoever, and that keeps the quality and it makes it look really great in the final render.